Disclaimer, as I already said, to a physicist everything looks very easy because you do stuff like this. Okay? Hardcore stuff. Or stuff like this, you know? And that's why everything else is very, very easy for you. Physicists are the best, okay? And in this video, I basically use a lot of analogies, and in the end you will completely understand capitalism and why there is so much religious belief system around it, and yeah, economists. So yeah, it's only 20 minutes, you know, chill out. Imagine a family member just comes out of the forest and explains to you he has a new friend found in the forest, and he is talking to him and he has interesting perspectives. And after a few hours of just reporting what he has to say, you find out that this friend is an anthill, and this anthill is communicating, for example, when the ants are forming letters on the ground, or they are forming some symbols to express certain stuff, and he's talking to the anthill and the ants are doing certain things. This analogy is used by Douglas Hofstadter. He founded this analogy, and he was using this to express his thoughts about the human brain and the consciousness, because you can look on the anthill and say, okay, it is made of a lot of ants and they have a certain routine how they are working together, right? They have communication signals with all that stuff. But the anthill as itself can be seen as a higher order structure out of all those ants, right? And it behaves in a certain way as a conscious being because it reacts to input from the environment, for example, right? When the weather is changing or whatever, when there is some attacker, some animal attacks the anthill or something, then the anthill is reacting to this. And this analogy is very interesting because I will use basically this analogy to explain you capital, the capital, and with this of course capitalism. Similar interesting stuff happens to honeybees. Those honeybees, they have interesting mechanics for communication. For example, the so-called waggle dance. Those bees can, if they strive out and explore the environment and they see whatever, a juicy flower, they go back to their colony. And they have a method which is called waggle dance, and with this they can encode the distance and the direction where the juicy flowers is. And they communicate this signal even, so it is basically, it has to do with the angle, and the angle that is relative to the actual sunlight. And because those bees are living on those hexagons, they can actually encode like not in 90 degree but in 45 degree steps, and this is enough, okay? And they can also encode with the art how exactly the waggle dance is performed, how much distance has to be traveled. And while they are doing this, they are even charging themselves like with electricity, and when this is uncharged, it even produces something like sound that the other bees even communicated this more. And this is very interesting. So there is a lot of interesting stuff happening inside of those colony animal stuff, for example bees and ants. And I have even more interesting analogies I will need in order to explain capitalism, and they are also some higher order structure interpretation of low-level physics. And it is just useful to have those tools, and they become something more than the higher level abstraction itself at some point. So just two physics geek examples. In a semiconductor, you have something like a grid with basically a periodic grid where electrons are sitting inside of some potential holes. And if something happens, like a photon is giving some energy to an electron, the energy can be enough that the electron becomes free and moves within this semiconductor. And we all know from school maybe that the hole that is left is also moving on the grid. And funny enough, you can interpret the hole because the hole is not an object, right? But the surrounding electrons that are surrounding the hole, they make it that in the end the hole behaves exactly like a particle. And this is very interesting because it is not an actual particle, but the environment looks exactly like this, as if there would be an electron with positive charge. But there is no actual, it's just a hole, right? And another interesting thing is in condensed matter. You have the same grid structures, right? And they are all solid. And if you just do something like this, there is vibrations within between all those grids. And those vibrations behave similar as a particle. And it has actually a name, and it's called phonon. And the funny thing is, this phonon is just a wave, okay? It is basically something like a wave, but it has also properties of particle. For example, it can scatter, like it can crash with another phonon, or it can even crash with another electron. So a non-existing particle, a quasi-particle, can interact with a real particle. And it does this because the models look like this, so we can say, okay, we call it just phonon, right? It is not a particle. It is not a particle. But there is something that looks mathematically like a particle, and it behaves like this. And this is a very interesting example. And it is a very useful analogy for better intuition. Like if you want to understand nature and stuff, those kind of particles are very helpful because they encapsulate a lot of properties of the whole condensed matter block, right? And you can describe a lot of it with just a single word. And all those examples, like the bees and the ants and the phonons, they demystify these higher order entities, right? Because we know the whole is not an actual particle. There is just something, that an entity, and it behaves as if there is an actual particle. And this is only demystifying it because we can understand it, okay? We as humans, we can understand it. And this is a very interesting thing because the ants in the anthill, they are basically small robots. They follow simple instructions and they are a simple algorithm. They cannot understand the bigger picture. But we can, and this is the difference. Now, the capital. To us humans, competition, okay, it sounds so natural and it seems so natural because this is what we see in our environment and blah blah blah, and we were socialized with it in competitions, and it makes fun in games and all that, and I understand. But you need to understand, I have a short and a long video about this. Competition is not the reason for human progress. It is actually the reason for so-called progress. And by this I mean usually something that is even declining human progress. And I have a lot of video material for this. So the global capitalism is only so complicated because we introduced already so much higher entities, higher order entities. For example, so as the same with electron and hole pairs, right? This is in higher order structure because it only works with the electron and within the framework of the solid matter, right? Only there is even this hole existing, but it is not in particle. And we have the same thing with debt, okay? State debt, debt of private person and stuff, it becomes a commodity and it has a value and it can be traded. But it is debt, okay? So this is something you have to keep in mind. It has a value and it can be traded, okay? And this is just a very fascinating analogy with the electron and the hole. You need to think about this. The hole is not existing, but it behaves as if it is a particle, and the debt is only existing because there will be someone who needs to create value in order to, equal out the debt, right? This is why it has value. And then is also a next higher level stuff happening, because there is debt from credits and they all can stacked to packages, okay, to debt packages, and they can also be traded in bigger structure, higher order entities on financial markets. And I even have just a fucking big business link for you. You can check out the language those guys is using and stuff. And I mean, the next thing is that contracts can be traded as well as a commodity, because you can calculate an actual value of a contract. And the very special contract that is very important to us right now is the so-called shorting, right? It was basically invented as a very interesting and I would say even logical thing to have. Basically, if you have a constant trade and a constant cash flow between parties, and they just want to ensure that everything is all right, even when the markets are somehow collapsing and have small ripples within the space-time and stuff, then those shorts are actually useful. But of course they are abused right now, and it is not used in the way it was intended to be. So it basically becomes a commodity of gambling. And for this you can of course just check out the movie The Big Short. It is very good explained there. And already I tried to explain in another video Hayek's motivation for his intuition and why he thinks the free market is so cool and so complicated. And within the framework of this video we can also talk here, because to him everything looked like a big natural calculator, like a big so-called cellular automaton, or even more educated and more modern, a big neural network, because he thought that the free market is something similar to our brain. And you can even check out that the paper from Frank Rosenblatt about the perceptron is citing Hayek, and this is just funny. Because what I think is that Hayek uses this stuff, and for him it is actually a mystified intuition, okay? It believes about mystified natural concepts such as evolution and survival of the fittest in competition, okay? And I explained this in my evolution video. Basically this evolution video also explains why there is this stuff with the N's and the B's, okay? This is just evolving out of Monte Carlo simulations, and you need to check out the video for this. Because we are not ends. This is a totally mystified interpretation that Hayek and all those capitalists have. We are not the ends. We can see the problem. And this is what I was thinking about my video with the Nash equilibrium. We can see what the problem is. We could change it. We can overcome the prisoner's dilemma. Because we are humans, we see what is happening. And it is not a law of nature. And that's why I claim capitalist ideology is toxic and stupid. It is just stupid. And we can understand ourselves and the world around us. We see the anthill, okay? We see it. And if we don't understand this, more humans will die. Because the capitalists, if the capital, right? If the higher order entity, which is somehow conscious, if the capital sees an opportunity to go further, it will do. And of course, if this costs life, this is not a problem. Because this is what already happened at the moment, right? We have a lot of useless biomass. like people that cannot consume, and they also are not human resources. So they can't be sucked out and they can't like consume. So they are useless, and that's why they are dying. And you see it in the refugee crisis, you see it in slave markets, you see it everywhere. Exploitation is a result of the capital doing its thing, and what the capital wants is growth. That's the only thing the capital is striving for. And yeah, this is basically what Agent Smith is already explaining in the Matrix, right? The capital is a virus. And all those capitalist friends, right? They have this understanding of this mystified version of this growth, that this growth is meaning something. Maybe it leads to progress or something, but it is of course not. As I already explained to you, competition is not the motivation for progress. It is actually declining progress. And I talk about this. Maybe it leads. Maybe the capital strives for something. Maybe it has the algorithm going on and stuff. But I doubt that capitalism will explore the galaxies or something. It will not develop further. I have even a video about digitalization and high frequency trading, and it is very important. You need to watch it at this point. Because there I explain what happens with automatization and algorithms that do certain stuff no one actually understands anymore. Because there's even deep learning involved and stuff. And all these hidden automated processes, this is so funny because there is even financial experts that say they have no clue what they are talking about. I just read up a citation from an article I will link. A single mysterious computer program that placed orders and then subsequently cancelled them made up 4% of all quote traffic in the US stock market last week, according to the top tracker of high-frequency trading activity. The motive of the algorithm is still unclear. Okay, these financial experts call those algorithms that I explain in my video as if there are a higher order entity with a consciousness and they have a motivation. Okay, it is already happening. Those high priests from the council, with all their religious imagery, they are already like total crazy pope fuckers. They have no clue what they are talking about. They are stupid. And this happens when you study economics. You think that this has something to do with science, but it has not. A lot of stuff happens because of profit maximizing, right? So it happens naturally because of the capital. CIA operations, wars, great inflation, so basically dumbfounding people. Yeah, television and all that stupid crap, pop music, all the results of competition, right? Poisoning by the food industry, environmental damages, okay? Exploitation of nature and stuff. All this in the name of growth of capital, right? That's all. And I mean, this is not a conspiracy and it is not a simplification, okay? All those fuckers are just blinded by ideology and they think there is some invisible hand. I mean, you need to understand those fuckers believe in religious imagery because they do not understand what I'm talking about. Because they are stupid. They are actually stupid people. That's just a fact. And I have an enormous amount of example videos listed in the video description. And in those videos you find a lot of source material. And I'm of course ranting about capitalism in all those videos. And you can maybe just check out the movie Margin Call with Kevin Spacey. It is awesome. And in this movie everyone already is always just repeating that he has no choice, he just does what the capital wants. Because this is how they are feeling about the problem. They have a totally perverted perspective about reality. Because they are blinded by this fucked up ideology. And I just repeat it once more. We are not ants, okay? We are the first fucking species that can change stuff because we can understand stuff. We see what the problem is. We see it. And I would argue that the capital is not exploring the galaxies, right? It is not developing further. It will just eat itself up, as I already explained in another video, and it will probably die with humanity. There is no doubt to me. It is not part of evolution. The capital is not part. It is more like a contradiction. It is ourselves not understanding evolution and not understanding ourselves, and it is ourselves blinded by mystified and redirected interpretations. Not scientists, but all those other fuckers, they are misinterpreting science. For example, Hayek. He was basically just misguided by his own intuition. And I can understand why he did this and how he was interpreting this. But it is just wrong. It is just wrong, and there is no flaw by just admitting that this was wrong. So I would be glad if we could just stop to pretend we are ants and just stop the stuff with the capitalism. Thanks. Hey YouTube. I just want to drop a little working definition for the word intelligence. And a friend once told me, like when I was 15 or 16, this working definition, and right now I think it's the best definition I can come up or I just had read in my life, because there's a lot of working definitions for intelligence, but I think the best definition is the ability to create and use analogies to understand stuff. And analogies, of course, if you have similar structures somewhere and they are working similar, but the words are different, then it's most likely still the same thing.